How deep can a person's voice go? You may have heard of the typical ranges in male voice: tenor, baritone, bass. You may have even heard of the countertenor, which is the highest male vocal range. But what about the deepest vocal range? What if I told you that there is a vocal range that goes even deeper than the typical bass range? Well, there is, and it's called the basso profondo. Vocalists who reach this range are also known as oktavists, and it's an incredibly rare range. Well, this is the legend of one of these men. This is the legend of a man named Eric. Born in St. Petersburg, Florida, USA, Eric began singing at a young age. At age 5, he sang in his local church choir and was immersed in the world of gospel music and choral music. As he got older, Eric joined the U.S. Army, and while serving in Germany, Eric formed an all-army a cappella group called Just Us. Eric and his a cappella group brought great joy to the people around them, on base and in the German communities. Eric's passion for singing was obvious, as after his service in the U.S. Army ended, he subsequently became a local wedding singer, formed another a cappella group called One Soul, and joined the St. Pete Junior College Community Choir. Eric was happy. And then one day, something fantastic would happen. Something that would change his life forever. After his first rehearsal with the St. Pete Junior College Community Choir, 2 professors would approach him: Dr. Marilyn Michael Evans and Dr. Janice Buchanan. They offered Eric a voice scholarship on the spot. Immediately afterwards, Eric would be immersed into the world of classical opera, including workshops, recitals, competitions, and even some piano. This would be quite a project for him at the time, as he balanced all of these opportunities while working a full-time job and raising his family. Eventually, in 2016, Eric took a brave step forward and completely immersed himself into the world of vocal performance. And it wasn't just singing. He was doing voiceovers and podcasts as well. For almost 10 years and counting, Eric would lend his voice to the world in a wide variety of projects, including the critically acclaimed Doom Eternal. During this time, Eric developed himself into an oktavist, which he used in his performance in Doom Eternal, and it is certainly a memorable one. Eric also runs his own YouTube channel, thatbassvoice, and entertains over 725,000 subscribers around the world in music, podcasts, and voices. Eric has enjoyed much success and happiness from his work as an oktavist and voice actor. But now it is time to tell his story, his adventures, his legend. This is the legend of Eric Hollaway. Eric, thank you so much for coming on to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. That's quite the introduction.
Alrighty, so let's start off from the very, very beginning. What inspired you to begin singing at the age of 5, and what inspired you to pursue music?
Well, as I said, as you stated, it all started at church in the children's choir. And at that time, it wasn't necessarily that I chose to be a part of the children's choir. It was more so if you were a child, you were in the children's choir. And so, but I enjoyed singing though. And I guess it was the introduction to me myself, knowing that I had this ability to sing, because it wasn't long before I was being selected to do a lot of the solo parts in the children's choir. And of course I didn't have a bass voice at that time, but my vocal abilities, I guess, had shown enough to impress the choir directors and give me those opportunities to do solo work. So that was the ultimate beginning.
Certainly was an amazing beginning. And back in those days, aside from the obvious gospel music and the church music that you grew up with, what were your other early musical influences?
I really didn't have any other influences other than the church music, because my father was an assistant pastor at the church, and my mom was a not the choir director, but she was a choir member, and one of the, I guess, first ladies, as you could say. So, unbeknownst to me, I grew up in a rather strict environment, and so secular music wasn't a part of my upbringing. I didn't hear it at home. I didn't hear it really at school much. So most of my upbringing was church music, gospel music.
Yeah, and I can relate to that in also a way as well. I was also brought up in church as well back when I was a kid. And I also sang in the children's choir as well, but I went down piano instead. My mom was actually my first piano teacher. So,
Nice.
so you can imagine, I mean, the good news is I enjoyed it when it came to piano. So at the very least, I can do 7 days a week, all 7 days practicing, and it worked. And it worked out, and also helped out a lot at the end as well. But it was very much a very strict sort of lifestyle as well, even for me, because there was a lot of classical music and very, very little contemporary. I mean, I did hear of these top 40 hits or even the odd Metallica or whatnot from friends at school, but that was about it. I wasn't actually listening to it at home, right? It was all Chopin, it was all Mozart, it was all Beethoven, it was all Rachmaninoff, maybe the odd Shostakovich once in a while, but yeah, very much I can relate to that exact lifestyle.
Yeah. And when you grow up that way, you don't really feel like you're missing anything because you don't know anything different. It's not until you get older and you look back and you start to, talk to your friends and see how other people grow up in their environments and their living conditions. And then it's like, wow, I didn't get to do any of that. So, but I don't regret any of it. My parents did the best they could. And I think that sheltered lifestyle, in a sense, helped create who I still am today as a person, as a performer, as an artist, as a creative. As a social media personality, whatever. But yeah, that was my upbringing.
Yep. And I totally agree. It's the same thing here. And honestly, nobody gets to experience everything when they're a child. I mean, even when you're an adult, you don't get to experience everything either, but less so as a child. So it's really also being just open to these new experiences and just understanding where your perspective comes from, right? And then you just grow from that part. I think it's important to have perspective onto a person's life, onto one's own life. Very, very much important.
Oh, yeah.
So going back to those days singing in your local choir, you mentioned about the opportunities to sing as a soloist in many of these solo parts in that time. But aside from that, overall, how was the experience? How was the community experience at that time?
Oh, it was like a family, literally, it was like a family, my church family. And I grew up with all these kids. Now as an elder, I still have friendships with most of these people that I grew up with in that church. We know each other's children. We know each other's grandchildren. So it was definitely a family environment, part of an extended family, if you will, from my own personal family. So, it was great,
Yeah, that's very, very good to hear. And music, I think you got a lot more of this than I did as a pianist, because in piano, and I mentioned this in different episodes in the past, it's very isolating because most of the repertoire that you play as a pianist is solo piano.
Solo, yeah.
You might have the odd concerto, you might have the odd chamber music, you might have the odd trio or quartet, whatever, but for the most part, you're going on your own. So to have that choir experience, I had a little bit of that, but you certainly had way more than I did. Very, very much it's so heartwarming to hear that community experience because music at the end of the day is designed to be shared with people.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's always been my experience musically, sharing it with other people. Even as a solo artist, I'm sharing my gift, my talents with whoever wants to hear it and enjoys it. So,
yeah, absolutely. And from those early experiences with that community and in your local choir at the time, what were the most important lessons that you learned from there? And how did they shape your own musical style as you grew up?
I think the biggest lesson is teamwork, how all parts contribute to the total sum. And everybody's part is significant, especially when you're talking about singing in harmony. You have to have all those pieces together for that harmonious chord to ring, and when one of those pieces is missing, you can definitely hear it. You can tell, So I think that was the biggest thing it taught me, musically, personally, just teamwork, working together, even as a solo person, doing all the things I do now online, there are other people that I refer to when I need information, advice, help, so it's not a 100% solo gig, even though I'm the face of the brand and I'm doing the lion's share of all the work behind the scenes. It's definitely a team effort in a general sense, in a wider sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree with the sense that really everything that you do as you mentioned in your experience, and really for many musicians out there, I would even go as far as to say, yeah, pianists may have a very isolated repertoire, but they're not alone on this too. I mean, even when it comes to the opportunities that pianists get, it's very much, you have to rely on that group who is hiring and inviting you to perform in that area. So very much it's a teamwork sense, like you said, and even in my case, I've seen it firsthand as well, with the importance of how much more powerful music can be with a team behind it.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So when did you discover that you were able to reach the bass? When you became a bass vocalist, around which time did you realize that you were in the bass range?
Well, I didn't understand music then as far as bass, baritone, alto, tenors, whatever, other than just hearing it in choir rehearsal where the choir director might say, okay, I need the boys, doing the lower parts or the girls doing the higher parts. That was the differentiation, It wasn't SSTB, all that. But my voice changed just like any other kid around the age of 12. And I didn't know what to expect when that happened, It was just a part of nature. So my particular experience was that, unlike what I've heard from other boys, I didn't do the roller coaster, when my voice was changing. My voice just went down, and it wasn't surprising. It wasn't out of the ordinary because my dad was a deep voice. And I always hoped I would have a voice like my dad someday. And so it's basically genetics, All my brothers have deeper level voices, but mine was sort of the anomaly to where it just really went down to the basement. And it wasn't until I started getting reactions from other people that I started to realize that something was different about my voice as opposed to everybody else's voice that was changing, even if theirs also went down. which is generally the case. You know, you get older, you go through adolescence, your voice drops, you know. But it was the attention that I started receiving that let me know something is different about my voice. And that attention started right at the voice change, and it continues to this day. You know, it's just, it's a familiar companion to me now, to have someone react or respond when they hear my voice. So that's just been a part of my life.
Yeah. And I have a sort of a similar experience when I was at that age, not to your extent, I would say, but pretty similar when in high school, people noticed that, oh, I could actually do announcements or some sort of announcing role. And then afterwards, when I did the announcements for my high school days, in university and in law school, I eventually ended up doing announcing for sports and doing all these different university level sports. So that was when I realized, wow, actually, they're onto something. And my dad also, I should mention this, my dad was also a classical vocalist back in the old days as well.
Hey, there you go. You go.
His voice is tenor baritone. He can sing both the tenor and the baritone ranges. My dad told me that I'm essentially a true baritone in my range. So thank you. And I heard, I was like, oh wow, that's a very, that I actually didn't realize that, because for me, I mean, it was my voice. I live every single day with it, so I don't really think much of it until
and I feel the same thing, you know. It's like, how do you feel to have a voice like that? And to me, it's just my voice, you know. I don't hear it like other people hear it.
Exactly. So it's like, in your experience and also in mine, it's when other people react to it and tell us respectively that they react to it. It's like, whoa, okay, well, there's something to it. But in your case as well, you would very much develop that opportunity through your voice, even when you were serving in the army. And as I mentioned in the introduction, you were stationed in Germany at that time, and you formed an a cappella group called Just Us.
Yeah.
What was the experience like with them?
Well, one short clarification. I didn't actually develop the group. I just was part of the development. It wasn't my brainchild. It was, I knew some other guys in my unit that sang, and we used to get together and harmonize in the bathroom because, of course, you get that ring in there. And together we formed the group. So it wasn't just my idea. So just to clarify that. But my experience with them was so awesome, you know. And to this day, I still have relationships with at least one of the guys. And he actually lives not too far from me here. And we've gotten together a few times and sang together here in my studio and just chit chat over a meal or whatever. But that, at the time, I was 19 years old. Actually, I was 18, because I went into the Army right out of high school 2 days after I graduated. So I was about 18, 19 years old when I got to Germany. It was my first duty station after basic training in AIT. And so I didn't really have a grasp on harmony as far as structured harmony singing, even though I did do choral singing in high school. They were always chasing me down the halls to sing in the chorus group and all that kind of thing. But that was the first time I really experienced just that kind of street corner harmony, doo-wop kind of harmony stuff. Because these guys were older than me. I think they were like 10 or so years older than me. And they kind of grew up with that in that doo-wop area, wherever they came from. And so I learned a lot from them as far as that style of harmonic singing. And of course, when they heard me, they were like, hey, we got to have you with us, you know. It kind of reminds me of the story of Melvin Franklin in The Temptations, when Otis Williams, you know, kind of followed him around town, as it was depicted in the bio movie. because he just had to have that bass voice in his group. And that's kind of how it was with me and these guys. You know, they just had to have me with them. And I, of course, was all in. And so that's when I also discovered that I had an ear for harmony, because I could hear one line of a melody, and I just instantly heard the harmony from it, either top or bottom. It didn't matter, you know. Even when I was a part of the group then, I would help place voices, you know, in the group because I could hear where they sat, you know, in the songs that we were singing. And I also did that later on in the group I helped form here in St. Pete, with my childhood friend. And so it was interesting that I had that ability to hear harmonies. But I didn't think anything of it. It was just something I could do. You know, all the things that I've done over the years that people recognize me for or I'm known for, a lot of that stuff is just, to me, it was just something I could do. Of course, when I was in college with the scholarship, that's when I really learned, you know, I'm going through music theory and all those things. But before that, and even since then, it's just been mostly just the God-given gifts that I have. And I don't know how else to explain it, you know, but that was a great time. That was a very great time. We performed there for about 3 years. We used to do competitions. We used to do just performances. We would do, I think, ceremonies. You know, we became well known around that area as a vocal group. You know, not just an army vocal group, but a vocal group. Period. A local German producer heard us somewhere, and he started putting us in like modeling shows, and he put us in the studio to do some recordings, some backup harmony recordings with this German singer, and, you know, just all those fun kind of things that it opened up the door for me, you know, and it just kind of fed into this drive, this hunger in me to use my voice even more and more in a creative way, you know.
That is amazing. And it's so heartwarming to hear that the local communities there really loved you to the extent where you had that opportunity that you said with modeling, with other things that were semi-related to what you were doing with the a cappella group at the time. And it goes back to what we were saying about the importance of sharing music there. And especially at the time, being even in service, even at the time, I mean, this would have been around, I would assume, like around peacetime. There wasn't an active war going on in
Yeah, we
Germany.
were in the so-called Cold War. This was 86, 87, 88. Yeah.
Okay.
Not a lot was happening as far as, you know, us being involved in any type of wars. But yeah, it was a pretty peaceful time, I guess you could say, at least for the U.S., you know.
Yeah. Were you stationed in Berlin, or where were you stationed in Germany?
I was North Country in Germany, a place called Buren, Paderborn. And I was North Country because I was in a remote site because of what I did in the military, which was a nuclear warhead technician. I worked on actual nuclear warheads and maintained them and, you know, all that kind of stuff.
Wow. That's a very, very fascinating time that you've had, and also experience you've had over in the North Country. I mean, that's that's fascinating. But and also it was the last, or the I don't want to say the last 3 years, but it was the 3 years that were coming up to the end of the Cold War as well. Mm-hmm. So very much a time of transition at the time. So I think music very much, as it always has been, that sort of world where people can step into, that third place where people can really unwind and be themselves in many ways. Yeah.
It's a unifier. Music has always been a unifier, you know.
Yeah.
It's an
Absolutely.
international language.
Absolutely. Absolutely. As they say, where words end, music begins.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And where your military service ended, your music still continued. So you would then form the a cappella group One Soul. You would also continue to sing in church. And then, as I mentioned, you joined the St. Pete Junior College Community Choir, and you got a voice scholarship on the spot from Dr. Michael Evans and Dr. Buchanan.
And
what was it like to work with them?
That was a crazy experience. That was my first college experience, if you will. It helped me understand my voice, my gift. They helped me shape it. They introduced me to different people. They actually wanted to send me to Europe to train with different opera male voices that they knew who lived there. But of course, at the time I was married and I had young toddlers, so that was out of the question. But at least they were thinking on those terms. They thought enough of my voice and my abilities to want to send me to Europe to train to be an actual performing opera singer bass. They put me in all sorts of bass singing competitions. So that kind of gave me stage performance. That's when I was introduced to the world of opera, because we did opera workshops, and that's when I started to understand the whole opera scene. That was the first time I actually had singing lessons, voice lessons, which they couldn't believe at first. But this was at a time where I was 25 years old. I had never had a voice lesson before, and they couldn't believe that was the case. And again, I attribute that to just the natural God-given talent that I was blessed with. So, but you need that structure. You need to go through those things, especially if you want to be a performer, on and on and on. That wasn't really my choice either. And I was actually in school on a voice scholarship, but then I was like, what can I do with this besides teach voice? And that wasn't my ambition. But I did learn. I learned composition, putting songs and chords together, cadences, all that kind of thing. And I learned that most of music theory is based on Bach and his teachings, his understanding of music. So, but yeah, it was an interesting time. I've always been a sort of a sponge as far as learning new things. So I take what I could use and I throw out the rest.
It's very much like Bruce Lee. Take what works and then throw out the rest. Doesn't
I can use this. Okay, I'll take this, and all the other stuff. Yeah. So I'm kind of still that way. So
yeah, I would also say this as well, because you had so much experience singing in choir. In a way, you got exposure and immersion to the Baroque periods of music as well, right?
Right.
So
not unbeknownst to me, but yeah.
So in a way, you had that experience, which is why I think you would be able to relate so well to. I mean, it almost fit like a well glove in some ways, like with the cantatas and the oratorios that would come afterwards. It's very much there. It's just that you never actually had a chance to tap into it until your 20s.
Right. That makes sense. I'll go with that.
Yeah. So, yeah, and it's also, we were also talking about competitions in voice as well. I mean, with a new vocal competition coming up next year, it's an international competition called Neue Stimmen. Mm-hmm. It's in, I want to say it's Germany. I want to be careful if I get the place wrong, but I think it's in Germany. And they host a competition it's for young vocalists, of different genders. So they have the full gambit of the range: soprano, alto, and tenor, bass, baritone, whatnot. But it's really a fascinating competition because it's in a way almost the Olympics of voice, of classical voice.
Right. So, and even for me back then, I was aged out of a lot of those competitions because, like I said, I was 25, 26, 27 years old. Right. And most of those competitions have an age gap that's usually within the normal college age student range. So that did kind of bump me out of a lot of competitions. But within the school itself, you know, they involved me in just about every competition I could get in. But yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, you still had all these important opportunities to develop yourself and to see where you're at, right? It's right. I mean, competitions. I mean, music isn't about competitions.
Exactly.
It's one way to see, to measure where you are.
Experience.
Exactly. And I think, I mean, in piano, there's kind of an issue with that, a problem with that, in the sense that if you want to make it big in the world of piano, you have to win either the Chopin competition,
the competitions,
the Kleinburn competition, the Holens competition, or it's a bit of a problem now in piano, where even if you have pure talent, if you don't choose to compete here, no one's going to find out who you are.
Right. Well, thankfully, you have the internet, and that's why I encourage people every chance I get when they come to me and say, I want to do what you do. How did you get started? Blah, 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 blah. And I said, just hit record and put yourself out there, you know, because you never know who's watching. You never know when it's going to come up on somebody's feed. You just never know. And so, like you said, if you don't compete in these competitions, they don't know who you are. If you don't put yourself out there to the world on the internet, you'll never be discovered, you know. And it doesn't guarantee you be discovered, but it definitely boosts your chances if you put yourself out there.
Yeah, totally agree. And I think a good example of that, there is one example that is Valentina Lazitsa in the piano world, who I don't think she really competed in any, or if she did, I don't think she won like the big one.
Right.
But her internet, her YouTube performances,
absolutely.
That was from
talent.
Yeah, that was from the early 20s.
Out there.
Yeah, exactly. From I think the early 2010s, when she showed what it was capable. I mean, she was playing the same pieces, the same virtuosic technical pieces, like Miss Totentons and the whole gambit. But I think it just captivated people in a way, also with her musicality at the time.
Absolutely.
And so
personality and all that showmanship, all of that is displayed online when you hit record. So
exactly.
People also, one of the things I've discovered as far as being online, people appreciate the fact that they can grow with you as you grow, you know, and you're giving them a glimpse into your vulnerability and your process and your struggles, and it's kind of like after a while, it's like then and now, and people love to see that and be a part of that growth. So yeah, it's definitely something I still encourage people. Just, you know, as raw as you may be right now, hit record and put yourself out there.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly, and especially in the world of AI over the last only 2 years.
Yeah.
If anything, the imperfections are beautiful, more beautiful than ever before now, because now you get to see where the little quirks are in that performance.
Exactly. What makes somebody truly unique.
Exactly. It's, I mean, if it's a completely clean performance, is it even human?
Exactly.
Yeah. So going back to your experiences, how did you discover your potential for the basso profondo range? Because as I said, it is a very rare range to hit. But how did you find that out?
Well, I knew I was a bass. You know, that was no question. I didn't learn about basso profondo until college, of course. So that's when I learned about that. I was a basso profondo, and then you have different types of bass, you know, lyric bass and all those different things. So I learned about those different aspects of bass. But it wasn't until my early posting days on YouTube that I was discovered by these guys in a Facebook group called oktavism, basstronomy, and choral. And forgive me if I got that mixed up. But a few guys in that group were followers of mine, fans of mine, and I didn't know it. And it wasn't until one day I was reading through the comments, which I tend to do often, and reply personally to people. It's hard to do now because just the vast number, but in the early days, I made it a point to personally reply to every comment. And I got an invitation to join their Facebook group. And so I went to the group and I joined, and I got such an overwhelming reception from these guys. It was just incredible. They knew about all my videos. They knew about, the different things I had done online, even though it was not much at that time. It was basically just YouTube. But they followed all my videos. They just, I was like a rock star to these guys. And they were the ones. That was the first time I heard the word oktavist. I had never heard the word before. But they told me I was an oktavist. These guys, they were just incredible as far as the depth of knowledge they had of the bass voice and the oktavis voice and the different oktavists and basses that were around and are still around, I guess. And that's when I really started educating myself on what an oktavist was, and a lot of that learning came from them. I started browsing the history of their group page and conversations and seeing the posts that they would put up with these different oktavists. And it was just, again, my mind's a sponge. I was just soaking this stuff in, but it was just so fascinating. And it was also, in a way, comforting to me, because for the first time in my life, I got a chance to understand myself in a way that I had never before. And it's kind of like, I hate to say it like this, but it's kind of like the experience of an orphan who seeks out his biological parents and finds them. It's nothing to that extent, but I just don't have a better analogy. But it was like I found my people, these people understand me. They know me, It's kind of, it was crazy like that. But yeah, that's when I started to understand what I held in my larynx and how rare it was. And that was like the birth of that bass voice, the early days of it. But yeah, that was a really amazing time. It helped me understand how I could do the things I can do with my voice. And it also cleared up something when I learned that an oktavist was a vocal singer. And you usually hear it like in Russian bass repertoire, those guys who's like, and come to find out, I'm one of those guys. I'm just not Russian, But I used to love hearing those bass choral, those male bass chorals and the Russian basses. Well, we called them basses. They were actually oktavists, but those Russian basses were just known. It's like, what do they got in the water over there? And then come to find out, I am one of those guys. I'm just American. And Glenn Miller is another one, and there are a few others, but I I came to find out and understand that we're a small group of people in the world, Oktavists, and it's a rare company, but it made sense of a lot of things from my past because, for instance, I used to audition to sing with different groups, a cappella groups, you name it, and I was with this one group, and I was the bass, of course. That's why they asked me to join. But every time I would sing my part, they would say, "Eric, come up. Eric, come up." And even back in children's choir, I remember people telling me, and in high school chorus, I remember them telling, "Eric, come up." And it always confused me. Even in college at the community choir, you know, we're singing Handel's Messiah. "Eric, come up." You know, and I'm like, I'm singing the bass. Where am I coming up from? You want me to sing baritone? It just didn't make sense until I learned I was an oktavist. So what I was doing all those years, in my ear, I'm singing bass. In everybody else's ear, I'm an octave below the bass part. And a light bulb went off, and it cleared all of that confusion up from my past singing experiences when people are like, "Eric, come up," when I'm the bass, you know? And so, but yeah, like I said, that was the first time I ever heard the word octavist. And I even Googled it at the time. And I don't think it was much of a word on Google at the time. Of course, now if you Google Oktavists, a lot of stuff comes up, and you might even see my picture. But then it was just totally new, and I think in the American musical repertoire, it was sort of new, you know.
Yeah, and you were talking about finding a new, almost like finding a new home. I would liken it to almost like a lone cowboy who found a town that welcomed him into the fold, into the town. So I probably pair it that way.
Right. But I don't want to say it like I was rejected everywhere else. It was just that I knew I was different. I knew I was unique in a way, just from people's reactions and the things they would say. But I didn't know why they saw me as unique and different.
Yeah.
So it was in that sense, it was like, okay, now I get it. Yeah. Now I understand.
Yeah, and I'm so glad you brought up the point about octavism being just so incredibly rare on that point, and even just searching for. And I also saw the Russian octavists too, and their bass tradition there as well. And I think at one point there were only about 12 octavists in the entire world, or something like that.
Exactly.
That is a super low number, and that, I mean, you can only count that on three hands, literally.
Well, I remember back when I was still in high school, I was invited to be a part of this national high school chorus, and we all met up in DeLand, Florida, but we were from all parts of the country, and you had to be in high school. Period. It was a high school chorus, a national high school chorus, and this renowned chorus instructor came from some college or university somewhere, and he was the one that headed it. And every year, I think it was a different person and a new group of kids. But that particular year, this was 84, I think, the year I graduated, or the summer before my senior year, one of them. And so I was up there, and even then, you know, among all the guys that were sent there to be basses, my voice it stood out, and it was the musical director at my church at the time who sponsored me to go. And when they came to that final performance, because we practice all week on a few songs, and then we give a performance to the public at the end of the week. So when they came to the performance at the end of the week, she introduced me, or I introduced them to the chorus director. I can't remember his name, but they spoke, and he was like, yeah, Eric, he just has such a rare voice. He's got like, I think the statistic he gave at the time was like, every one in so many thousand boys or men have a voice like this. And this was when I was in high school, you know? And so yeah, it was just crazy. Like I said, when I learned what an octavist was and understood what that was, all that stuff just made sense. Everything made sense. You know, Eric come up, it made sense, you know? So yeah. Yeah.
That is amazing. Oh man. And that would eventually lead to you taking a major leap of faith by quitting your job at the time and then jumping headfirst into voiceover work and singing. What was that spark that inspired you? Like, what was the ultimate spark? Or was it like a gradual raise to that?
That decision was based mainly on my voiceover work at the time. I was doing voiceovers like on nights and weekends after my full-time job. And it got to a point to where financially I was making as much doing voiceover on nights and weekends as I was at my regular job, you know, with overtime and all that. And so I told my wife, I said, baby, we have a decision to make, you know. And of course, you never know if you can sustain that the next month, the next year, blah, blah, blah. But like you say, it's a leap of faith. And I took that leap and I trusted in God. And it was the best thing I could have ever done. You know, my life has just blossomed and bloomed, and the opportunities that I've been a part of since then, it's just incredible, you know, and I never would have experienced any of it if I hadn't left the security of my full-time job, you know, getting a regular paycheck and benefits and all that, you know. Because literally, I did not know where my next dime was going to come from. But you never know unless you take that leap, you know. So it definitely paid off for me tenfold.
Yeah, it really did. And since then, you've done tons of voiceovers, and you still kept singing as well. And your work spans multiple genres. And there's one work in particular that you only show up for a little bit of it, but it's literally just a minute of it. But it is so profound, and that's in Doom Eternal. How did you get involved with that project?
Well, like pretty much like any project, group, collaboration that I've been a part of, people have contacted me. Mick Gordon, and I didn't know who Mick Gordon was at the time, sent me an email, and he asked if I would mind being a part of this project he was working on. And he didn't give me a lot of detail, but I knew it was a video game. And he said he had some parts in the arrangement he was putting together that, you know, I guess he had seen my videos online. Again, people, hit record, put yourself out there. You know, he had seen some of my videos online and was like, that's the guy. That's the guy for these parts. Now, at the same time, and this was, I think, a bit of confusion at the time. At the same time, he put together this choir. And they used to meet somewhere in Texas, I think it was, for their rehearsals. But Mick approached me personally. I was not a part of that choir thing. That was completely separate. And there was nobody in that choir who was doing those bass parts, because I know that came up, a few names popped up, but that nobody in that choir did those bass parts. That was me. That was the arrangement between me and Mick personally. And so he explained the project, the parts that I would be in. He sent me some notes. He sent me some names. He sent me some chords, and we went back and forth collaborating on those for a couple of months. And then it got to a point to where he got what he needed. He was satisfied with my work, and that was the end of it. And so Doom, of course, came out, and Mick posted a section of, I think it was a part of the game when you go in this cathedral, and it's like it encases you away from all the chaos that's going on out in the game with the demons and all the shooting and, you know, all that kind of thing. You come into this cathedral and it's like a sanctuary, literally, you know, it's quiet, it's clean, you're not being hunted or whatever. And then you hear these chants. and I didn't know how I was going to be in the game, you know, how he was incorporating my voice and all of that. But he put a clip of that on, I think it was, Twitter. And that clip is still on my Twitter page at the top. And he was like, "Hey, check out this Eric Hollaway, blah, blah, blah." He, you know, and I noticed that I woke up one morning, because I didn't even know when the game was coming out. But I woke up one morning and my Instagram had just exploded. You know, I'm getting all these comments from people. I don't know who these people are. People are following me. You know, Instagram just exploded, and I didn't know what was happening. And then somebody sent a clip of that same clip that Mick had put on Twitter. And so I went to Twitter and I saw it and I was like, "Oh, cool. It's so cool," you know? But that was the first, I guess you could say that was my first taste of virality, you know, internet virality. Yeah, that was a pretty cool moment. You know, I don't know what else to say. It was cool to hear yourself like that, and so many people enjoyed it, you know.
Yeah, I mean, it was a hell of an experience, pun intended. So,
like I said, I mean, I knew the game Doom. I knew the game Doom, but it wasn't one of the games that I played, but I knew the franchise, and to be a part of that franchise, I thought was pretty cool, you know. Yeah. And you know, I'm part of it. I'm there, you know. And that particular soundtrack, you know, and then learning who Mick Gordon was and his contributions into the music of games, popular games for years, you know, that was pretty cool, just learning who he was and the fact that he contacted me and we actually spoke on the phone a few times, you know. And so, yeah, that was my first major collaboration, I could say, you know. So that was a really cool experience. It's unfortunate that with the aftermath with Bethesda and all that other stuff with the soundtrack, you know, I think it would have been a lot more popular, like most of his other works, because he kind of like washed his hands of that. You know, whatever he went through with Bethesda and the other, you know, he kind of washed his hands of the whole project. So you won't even find much of it online as far as with linking Mick Gordon to that soundtrack. So it's unfortunate, but it would have been a lot more popular, I think, if it went through like all his other video game soundtracks.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, people still remember him for that. They still
Oh
remember
yeah,
him, and not just for that. I mean, for even the other games that he's made music for.
right.
He's,
Yeah,
I mean, people don't just know him as the Doom Eternal composer.
right. And
They
that's
also
what
know
I
him
got.
as Mick Gordon, right?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. And
So, but yeah, it was an incredible experience. It's one of the highlights of my professional career, even to this day. You know, I'm very proud that I was a part of it. Yeah.
yeah, could you demonstrate that part of Doom Eternal for us?
Lost der Leben tar Helmas Rana Sternai roar of hell lark no revenar reina skis Ivar, something like that, and then it goes on into the different part.
That's amazing. That is amazing. Well, my goodness. That's amazing. Sounds exactly like the original performance.
It was me, you know. So
That is
people
amazing.
say,
And
how do you do that? People ask, how do you do that? And you know, sometimes I get snarky. I say by opening my mouth. But yeah, it's me, you know.
yeah.
So this is where my voice lives. I don't have to force trying to get deep. I don't have to, you know, do any subharmonics. This is just my voice, you know. So
Absolutely, and it's again, it's what an amazing performance right there. Of the first two lines of the Prayer of the Diminished,
yeah, thank you, appreciate it.
and with all of this discussion about music and vocal and octavism, we then come to the ultimate question that every musician has to ask themselves: what is musicality to you?
Musicality to me is your creativity, your understanding of whatever instrument you're proficient at, voice, guitar, piano, whatever. Your upbringing, your desires, your culture, your influences expressed by you. That's your musicality. That's my definition.
Great answer. And with that in mind, how do you develop your own musical style to achieve musicality in that sense?
That can be answered in two ways because organically, over time, you're going to have a style. So that's one answer. You look back on yourself, your history, and you see and start to understand and start to hear a style, whatever that might be. The second answer is you actually create and develop a style. And for that, you're very conscientious of what you're doing, how you're doing it. And that's the second answer. You actually create a style for yourself. For me, it was more the previous answer. I was just doing what I do, doing it how I do it. And over time, I can look back and I hear myself doing certain phrases a certain way in a song, or you know, certain lifts in a song, or you know, all those nuances. And I've come to understand that's my style. That's how I like to interpret a song, a piece of music. You know, that's how I'm differentiated from somebody else who may sound similar to me. And I don't think either way is wrong, you know. It's just, you know, if I wanted to, I could conscientiously create a style for myself, you know, emulate other people. And that's all part of the creative process. That's all part of what I just said about musicality, you know, not necessarily copying somebody else, but taking essences from what they did, what they brought to the table. It's like, oh man, I like how they did that riff, you know, or I like how they sustained that note, you know, and you incorporate that with your own creative style, and then it becomes something uniquely new.
Yeah, great answer. And honestly, I see this not only in your work, but even on many of the musicians that I've had previously on the podcast as well. We were talking a little bit before we started recording. I mentioned that my cousin is a violinist. Well, my cousin, I had him on an earlier episode of my podcast. His name is Kirsten Leung.
Okay.
He was the first and only Canadian to win the International Menuhin competition, which is basically the Olympics of violin.
Wow.
At
Nice.
13 years old.
Woo-hoo.
Yeah. And he also at the time he was studying with Jonathan Crow, who I also had on the podcast, who was the concertmaster of the Toronto Symphony Orchestra.
Nice.
On his episode, Jonathan told me that Kirsten did essentially what you just mentioned. He took so much inspiration from other violinists, from Menuhin, Heifetz, from all these very well-known, world-renowned, legendary violinists. But he incorporated it in a way that it was still him. And even at that age, Jonathan said, from then all the way till now, it's very rare to hear a violinist or really a musician that has a unique style into of themselves, let alone one that has it at such a young age.
Right. He was a prodigy.
Yeah, he was a prodigy. And Jonathan, he said, it's rare that I turn on the radio and I hear, oh, that's Menuhin, or oh, that's Heifetz. With Kirsten, I turn on the radio and I can give him any violin, and it's like, yeah, that's Kirsten right there.
Yeah. And it's nice to be distinguished like that, I think, you know, because we are so saturated now with vocalists. You know, you have all these different vocal competitions, The Voice, you know, X Factor, American Idol, you know, and just over the years, they're nonstop. You know, there are so many talented vocalists in the world today, unlike when I was younger. But it's caused such a saturation of sound. And after a while, everything starts to sound the same. So it's nice when you hear something that is different, but it still sounds good and pleasing. And I feel fortunate, just based on the comments I receive, that people feel like I am one of those unique voices that are pleasing to their ears. And I'm thankful for that, you know. But that goes across every genre, not just vocals, you know, piano, violin, you know, cello, bass, all of it. You know, there are certain people who, in all the noise, they stand out, you know. And yeah.
I think with international competitions, I think it's become a lot better in the sense of seeing a unique pianist or a unique instrumentalist. I think in some areas. So I think a really good example is the 18th International Chopin competition, the one that occurred in 2021. The winner of that competition, Bruce Liu, the first Canadian to win first prize at that competition, he you can tell that there was a special style to him.
Yeah.
And I think the entire jury was unanimous on that. I think even showed in their marking at the time. And even the audience was thinking, yeah, this guy is so very different from everybody. And so like there's stuff like that. And then there's also Yoon Chan Lim in the Clyburn, who at 18 won the Clyburn and is in Fort Worth, Texas, and he's only 21 years old right now.
Wow.
And he won it 3 years ago at 18, and he has a very unique style of his own as well. So there still is a lot of room for unique styles, and
it'll always occur.
Yeah,
it'll always occur. You know?
Yeah, and I think jury members are very, very good at finding that out. That's why there are certain years in the Chopin competition where there wasn't even a first prize that was awarded.
Wow.
Yeah.
They were all that good.
So the highest prize that they could award was a second prize, but they did not award. I think this was 1990 and 1995. There were no first prize winners.
Wow.
Yeah. So if they don't feel that someone was worthy of that point, I think from a stylistic perspective, but also with the music, they're not going to award that.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Just to do that. I mean, if I was raised from a child, you know, as a vocal prodigy or whatever, just constantly getting instructions and singing and blah blah blah, I don't think I'd be in the position I am now. I don't think I'd enjoy it as much. I mean, I'd enjoy it, but it came so organically at such a later time in my life. You know, it's a totally different experience for me. And at the same time, I feel good that I'm in a position to be inspiring as an older person for so many younger people, you know, and people my age, you know, because so many people my age, my peers, feel like they're left out of all this new technology and the internet and all the opportunities that it has, because they just don't know that technology, or they're afraid of it, or don't understand it, or whatever it might be, you know. So I feel kind of like an ambassador in a way, inspiring people and letting people see, and not so much so to the world, but firstly and mostly to my own kids and grandkids. You know, I'm an inspiration to them and what is possible for them. You know, I'll be 60 next year, you know, and as long as I can use this voice, I'm going to be online using it, you know? So I think it's so much different than the people you just mentioned, who from toddlers are probably just trained and, you know, learning that discipline for whatever instrument that they have. And if they continue to enjoy it as they grow up and get into their adult years, that's fantastic. But I think for me, I think if that was my discipline from such an early age, I'm not sure I'd still be a part of it like I am today, if that makes any sense, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. No, right. It makes sense. Yeah. It makes sense. And I think there's a bit of an issue, I would say, speaking as a person of ethnic Chinese descent. Yes, we have a very big reverence for classical music and piano, and it's great. I want to make it clear it's very great, but it can get extreme.
Yeah.
So
I can imagine.
Yeah. I mean, I mean, luckily I don't know I don't personally know people who went through a very extreme version of this.
Yeah.
But it is more common than not. There are examples of kids who absolutely hated
Yeah.
the piano or music afterwards because it wasn't fun for them even when they were learning it, right?
Right.
Now I get it. You want them to work hard. You want them to practice well and practice properly and to
Right.
develop themselves
Right.
into a musician. But
Right.
it's a similar problem with hockey where if you push them too hard, they won't even love it anymore,
No.
right? They're not
Yeah.
going to see it in the same light
Exactly.
as in your case, you grew with it organically, right?
Yeah.
There has to be a balance of working and practicing hard in this, but also enjoying and having perspective as to why you're doing this, right?
Right.
Why are you a musician? Why?
Right.
I mean, and that's also a part of your musicality as well. At the end of the day,
Right. 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 Yeah.
yeah, it's tragic to hear some of these cases, but
I know.
it's such an important lesson to learn.
Yeah. And I think it boils down to, like you hear people say, you got to have balance in life. You just, at some point, you got to learn to balance your life between all the things you're involved in, all your ambitions, all your desires, and your reality, and just find that balance, that sweet spot, to make it all work, or eliminate what doesn't work, make those tough choices and say, I want to do this. I wish I could do this, but it's just not for now,
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And with all these different experiences in music that you've had, how does one train to become an octavist? Well, I guess first of all, we should probably start from the perspective of, and we sort of talked about this a bit earlier in the conversation, what exactly is the basso profondo range? And then how does one train to become an octavist, if at all?
Well, as far as ranges go, I think, because I've seen charts, I'm not that musically intellectual about my own voice, let alone anybody else's. But I've seen charts where I think the lowest note for a bass is a C3, or somewhere around there. Now I may be wrong, but that's just from recollection. I'm thinking. But you can find these charts anywhere online. What's the range of a soprano? What's the range of a tenor, mezzo, all that, baritone, bass. And what I understood once I learned I was an octavist was that an octavist range is a full octave below what American standard music has termed to be a basso profondo. So that's the only definition I know, but I also know that in operatic music, I don't think anything has been written for bass lower than, was it C2 in any piece of music? And that would be from, I can't remember his name, but he's known for writing those lower bass parts in vocal music. But again, I'm not a music scholar like that. There are people who could explain all that stuff like, crazy. But that's just from my understanding over the years and discovering my own voice and all that kind of thing. So I would just say, do your research. The information's out there online. There are people in the music world who know that stuff. That's never been, it's never been my intent to know music or vocality to that extent. Even though I do research it from time to time just to understand my own voice as much as I can. but I try to help people as much as I can as well. And that question always comes up. How can I do what you do? and I don't make anything up. And I try to be as honest as possible. But frankly, it is just God-given, you know. I didn't try to be an oktavist. I didn't train to be an oktavist. I don't think you can train to be an oktavist. I don't think you can train to be a bass. A true bass is born, you know, and that term true bass makes all the difference. If there's a true bass, there's a false bass, you know. So, and there are people who have really honed the subharmonic technique, you know. And I don't have anything against any of that, any of those techniques. But for me personally, I want to do the most that I can do with my natural voice. And that's what I do, you know. And so, yeah, I do vocal exercises. I drink plenty of water. I get plenty of rest. I try not to raise my voice. I'm very conscientious of the air environments that I'm in. So in that way, I protect my voice. I take care of my voice, you know. And I encourage everyone to do that. I even thought about possibly trying to learn subharmonics. So many people are like, oh, dude, you got to do it. You got to do it. You'll be doing a B0, you know, and all that kind of thing. But maybe one day, I don't know. I'll surprise everybody. But for now, I just want to be able to do as much as I can do with my natural voice. I think there's enough there to keep me busy enough, you know. So, but yeah, there are some really great subharmonic executionists out there, and I say more power to them. You know, do your thing. But I can't teach anyone subharmonics. I don't know subharmonics. Just let me put it out there. Some people ask me, you know, I don't know that stuff. But there's a lot of videos out there that can steer you in the right direction. But yeah, I don't think you can train to be a bass. You can train to improve your voice. You can train to expand your range to a point. A lot of that has to do with the size of your diaphragm and your breathing technique and sustaining, you know, the air and your back and your ribs, all of that. And so you can learn those things and improve the sound, the depth to a point, the resonance to a point, you know. But you're encased in whatever your natural thing is, your natural limits, you know. But definitely you can push those boundaries to a point.
Yeah. That's such a very, very detailed answer to the vocal training and the nature of the different vocal ranges, especially in your case, the octavist range. And it gives so much perspective into a lot of the work that goes into training whatever vocal range that a person is in. Because I can imagine that you've seen or heard a lot of misconceptions about singing, vocal performance, and in your case, oktavism. What are some of those greatest misconceptions that you've seen?
I haven't heard much. I haven't heard much really misconceptions, other than the fact that if someone's telling you you can train yourself to sound that way, if they're talking about naturally, then that's a great misconception. If they're talking about using techniques, growling or subharmonics or whatever other techniques are out there, then yeah, it's possible you can emulate an emulation. So you have to understand the difference there. But I don't think I've come across any real misconceptions other than that, saying that you can train yourself to sing like me or sound like me. I didn't even train myself to sound like me, you know, but I do train. I don't want people to think that I don't work on my voice. I do train, I do sing, I do work with a vocal coach now. Just like famous athletes, you know, they have trainers, they have coaches. So there's no shame in being coached or trained, you know, even if you have natural ability, you need that. So that's something else I tell people, you know, what can I do to improve my voice, to sound better, to get deeper or whatever? I would say, well, first of all, what's around you locally? Find a school teacher, college or high school that teaches chorus, that teaches voice, you know, or just someone who teaches voice in the marketplace, and start working with them, you know, get lessons, vocalize every day, and all the other things that you have to do to take care of your voice. If you're a smoker, you know, if you're a heavy drinker, you know, those things aren't going to improve the quality of your voice. They're going to negatively affect the quality of your voice. So it's a lot of things that I do. You know, I don't eat certain foods. You know, I avoid alcohol. So there's a lot of things I do and have done over the years to take care of my voice and to train and to exercise. Every day I'm singing, which is one of the best things a singer can do. Every day, sing, you know. Understand your limits, you know. Understand when your voice is tired and give it a break, rest. Understand how foods affect your voice. One of the things I learned when I was going through voice work in college was that chocolate, believe it or not, was good for bass voices. And that may be controversial, you know, because you have the dairy aspect, which dairy, if you don't know, produces phlegm in the voice and the throat, which isn't necessarily a good thing, depending on whatever you're trying to do. But at the same time, the way it was explained to me, the chocolate, the dairy in the chocolate, it kind of coats those vocal folds, vocal cords, and you need that as a bass. And I know from experience, singing with a dry throat is not something you want to do. And so one of the stories I used to hear, Pavarotti, if you don't know who that is, look him up. He used to eat a bowl of pasta, spaghetti, before his performances. That's how he coded his voice. He wasn't a bass, but, you know, everybody kind of develops their own thing in caring for their instrument, you know, and you have to understand what works for you and what doesn't. But that takes time. It takes effort. And I encourage everyone, get to know your voice. That's why I got so excited when I met those guys from the Facebook group, basstronomy, because it actually gave me a glimpse for the first time into how the mechanics of my voice operated, you know, and what allowed me to be able to do the things that I do with my voice, you know. So that was such an enlightening experience for me. And we all, as musicians, vocalists, have to get to that point to understand how you're able to do what you do, whatever that is, with your voice, you know. So yeah, I encourage that. It's a journey, you know, and I think it's a fascinating journey, you know, to discover those things along the way and put them to use, you know. So yeah, that's my thing. But going back to the question, I don't really recall any real misconceptions other than that one, that you can train yourself to sound like me. You know, I don't think so. So
yeah. No, and that's great. That's great advice, really, for those who want to pursue a career in music, especially in vocal performance. And really, it's a lifestyle thing and even as a sports announcer myself, it's something that I also keep in mind of as well, with the certain foods that I avoid, with staying hydrated. Because let me tell you, when you're announcing basketball games and hockey games, especially at the university or national or even international level, it can get very, very rough. So I would regularly go to, if it's like a 2-hour game, I go out with 3 bottles of water. If it's longer than that, I go like per 2 hours, I add an extra bottle of water on top, because that's how much water I go through. And
it's necessary, you know, whatever it takes to soothe and coat and keep those folds hydrated, you know. And it's good for your body in general anyway, drinking water.
Exactly. You should always be hydrating regardless of what your water. Yeah, exactly. And for those of you who are not familiar with Luciano Pavarotti, one of the greatest tenors of all time, part of the 3 tenors, and he tragically passed away in, I think, 2007 from pancreatic cancer. But yeah, a legendary singer in his own right for many, many decades. Definitely check him out. I mean, if you've heard opera, you certainly would have heard Pavarotti at some point.
And he was one of my inspirations. You know, even though he's a powerful high tenor, just the vocality, you know, he inspired me. And you don't have to be influenced only by somebody who's in your particular genre or doing what you do. You can be inspired by their discipline. You can be inspired by their tenacity to try new things. You can be inspired by just their musicality. You can be inspired by some of the idiosyncrasies they may have about their craft, their art, you know. So there's a lot of ways to be inspired by people, but his vocals, he inspired me, you know. And if you dig enough online and research some of his interviews and stuff like that, you'll hear about the people who inspired him. You know, we're all influenced by somebody. So, yeah.
Yeah. And the thing that I've realized about Pavarotti, even just listening to him, is, at least from what I'm hearing, it's that he's able to hit every note in such a relaxed tone. It's so relaxed. Like, you don't hear him struggling to hit anything.
Right. Not at all.
So relaxed. And I think another good tenor, but he tragically passed away way too soon, Mario Lanza.
Oh, yeah.
Mario Lanza. Wow. I just
discovered Mario Lanza because I'm such a classic movie buff. I love watching old movies. That's when I first discovered him, you know, singing in the movies he was in. And then I did the research and learned, you know, he was actually a singer before he became the famous actor. But yeah, he really did pass away early in his career in life. Yeah. But yeah, another beautiful voice, you know. and just his style, his charisma, you know. Those are the things that always impressed me about people, about vocalists, you know.
Yeah, yeah. And Domingo is another one as well. Another part of the three tenors. Actually, 15 years ago, I went to his performance in Toronto.
Nice.
And
did you meet him?
No, I didn't meet him. It was actually at the same place where they host the National Bank Cup for tennis. In Toronto. So it was like a gigantic tennis stadium that was refitted into a concert hall. So we never got a chance to meet him. But man, really, really good. And he was 70 something years old at that point already. Mm-hmm. So really,
and he went from a tenor to being a bass, or vice versa.
I think it was vice versa.
Yeah,
I think it was baritone to tenor. I'm not too sure though. I could.
Yeah,
I'm
off one of
them. Yeah.
But just the fact that he was able to do that and do it so seamlessly, you know, I thought that was incredible. And that inspired me, you know, just his ability to do that. One of the things that I work on often is all my different octaves. And that's one of the things I'm working with my vocal coach now to develop a stronger, higher range. Even though I have a pretty strong higher range now, but you can always improve. So I'm working on all my octaves. And when I perform a song, I want to be able to incorporate, if the song calls for it, those higher octaves along with my lower octaves, you know? And I think it's just so cool to be able to just float through all those different ranges within one song or one piece, you know? So again, that's just part of me just trying to do the most I can with this voice I have.
Yeah. And Thomas Hampson, an American baritone, also
not familiar with him.
Yeah, so very, very, very legendary baritone. He's been performing for decades too. He also teaches, of course, in university.
I have to look him up.
But he is, I mean, he's done a bunch of operas. Like, I mean, a bunch of the arias are really well known, like Largo al Factotum, being a very well known one. That's for the audience. That's where you hear the Figaro part. That's the aria. Yeah. But he is he's solid in so many ways. He nails a lot of these like Verdi's operas are no question. Legendary in that part. But yeah, check him out as well. He's also he's been around for many decades and has been very successful in his own right as well. And with all of these different experiences that you've had in music, what are the most important lessons that you've learned from your career thus far?
For me, the most important lesson, or one of the most important lessons, is to stay grounded. I'm surrounded by so many people and I get so much attention for my voice. Staying grounded has helped me navigate and make some of the choices that I've made, career choices. Because if you go around believing the hype, you know, as they say, you know, it actually shrinks those opportunities. And nobody wants to be around you, no matter how good you might be. No matter how your voice moves them, or your instrument, how you play moves them. If you're not grounded, you know, if you're conceited, if you're braggadocious, if you're throwing it in people's face all the time, I think that's one of the biggest things. Just to be grounded in life, no matter how good you may be. Just be a person, you know. Of course, hone your craft, work on your craft, get as good as you can with your craft, but stay grounded. And I think by that, your entire life, not just your musical life, will be benefited from that.
Yeah. Very, very important lesson to keep in mind. And as we begin to close this episode, what are the most rewarding things that you have experienced from all these different opportunities? And what would you like to pass on to our audience about your entire career?
Ooh, those are some heavy ones. One of the most rewarding things I would say is the fact that I get to share my gift with the world. You know, the internet has given me that opportunity to move beyond my local community as far as expressing myself and allowing others to hear me express myself. I've gotten so much appreciation from people all over the world for the things that I do online, most of which is singing, and how it helped them through a moment, or it calmed their baby down, or it reminded them of a period or a person in their life. It's an honor to be able to bring such joy to people on a large scale, you know, talking about the internet. It's not something that I sought after. It just happened. And in a sense, I take it as a important responsibility, you know, because when I get comments from people, I don't know who these people are. I don't know how old they are. You know, they might be 7-year-olds or 77-year-olds, you know, but I understand the position I'm in that regard, and how important my words can be and affect people. And so I don't take that lightly. So for people to appreciate me in that way, that's really, you know, it's just an incredible part of my life, you know. Now the second part of that question was what again?
Second part of the question was, what would you like to pass along
Yes.
to the audience in regards to your entire career?
Well, I think I mentioned or touched on that before. The fact that, you know, I see myself as an inspiration to not just people my age, but mostly to my most popular demographic, which is millennials, 18 to 35, 40-year-olds, and even younger. My grandkids are younger, you know. I want to be a positive influence. I want to be an inspiration to them. I want to let them see, you know, not just hear about or read about. They actually can see me doing these things online and see that, you know, this guy is real. You know, it's not just something I heard about. Nobody made it up. This guy is real. He does exist. You know, at least for now I do. But my legacy will live on. You know, and I think about that every time I record myself and put it online. That's a part of my legacy to my kids, to my grandkids, and to anybody else who appreciates what I do online. And again, I take that very seriously. I don't take it for granted. I don't take any of this for granted. It could all be gone tomorrow. It could all be gone today, you know. I enjoy making people feel good and being able to use my voice to do that. I understand the power of my voice, and I try to use it for good, you know. And whether one person recognizes that or a million people recognize that, that's what I want. I want to be that inspiration. I want to be that person that somebody remembers for, getting them through a tough time, or giving them a nugget of information from my podcast, or just hearing my voice, helping them fall asleep or get through a stressful moment. I appreciate being in that position, and it makes me feel good to be so.
And you truly are an inspiration for so many people around the world, and you've made so many people feel great about so many different things, and it shows through your voice and through your work. Eric, thank you so much for coming on the show and to share your experiences and to share the living legend of Eric Hollaway.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you.
And thank you to our audience for tuning into this episode of This is the Legend of. You've just heard or seen the living legend of Eric Hollaway, that bass voice. You can check him out on his YouTube channel, That Bass Voice, and you can also check out his website, www.thatbassvoice.com as well. His social media is also the same, using the same handle, That Bass Voice, so be sure to check him out on all of these different platforms. Also, be sure to check out our platforms as well. This is the Legend of, our website, as well as our various platforms here as well. For Zondo, the like button, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and click on the bell notification icon so you'll always be notified whenever we upload. Also, be sure to follow us on our Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and iHeartRadio, or wherever you get your podcast from, so you'll always stay up to date and connected with us. Signing off for now, this is Amos Vang. We'll see you in the next episode. Stay safe, stay healthy, and stay legendary.